Welcome back to the In Between Roles podcast. I've always been fascinated by stories that connect us, and this podcast brings to life the global perspectives I often write about in my newsletter. And today I'm super excited to welcome Nejla, who is based in Singapore. She's an entrepreneur, venture partner, lecturer, sits on the Singapore Council. We met through a mutual friend many, many years ago, and I'm so happy that we instantly connected. So thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. Looking forward to it.
I named off quite a few things. I know you're just to me, you're like multi hyphenate, right? You're CEO, you're doing so many things. Every time we chat, you're doing something new and it's super exciting. And before we kind of dive into a lot of that, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Okay, so that's probably the question the hardest to answer. Some people don't like to listen to the answer, but anyway, so I'm Najla. I'm Algerian, 100% Algerian. I was born in Paris for medical reasons, and then I moved to Algiers from 0 to 8 years old. And then at 8, I moved to boarding school in Switzerland where I lived from 8 to 18 years old before going to university in Paris. And then after that, moved to Singapore. And I've been in Asia for 20 plus years now. And I've spent most of the time in Singapore, but also 4 years in Shanghai. And I like to say that my daughter, who was born there, is proudly made in China.
Yeah, I love that.
So
It's like,
that's me in a nutshell.
oh, I love that. And it's just, I say the same thing about my daughter, but she was made in Dubai. Doesn't quite have the same ring to it. But I love hearing about your journey. And it's, one of the things that we explore a lot on in this podcast is just talking through everyone's journey, right? Because we all have such different perspectives. And I think it's nice for us to see that no one has kind of a linear path, whether it's through life or professions. And, you talked about going through and you travel through different continents before landing in Singapore. So, do you feel like there is a part of your story that has shaped who you are today?
It's interesting because I don't think I spend much time reflected on it on my own unless I'm asked. I guess I didn't realize that being in an international boarding school in Switzerland that it will be well, first of all, naturally it's from 8 to 18, so that's very important years.
Mhm.
But I didn't realize how much it was gonna shape my future and my sensitivity towards anything I approach or how can I um, like read a room certain times because I'm not sure if it's just the fact that I was in international school or the fact that I went to boarding school so young. So you also have to um, be aware of your environment. I was the youngest, the first boarding school I did, I was the youngest of the entire boarding school. There was nobody my age. So I had to very quickly, I left from a very sheltered home to all of a sudden, I'm sharing my room, I'm sharing my bathrooms with other girls. I'm the youngest one. Yeah, so I feel like I'm very sensitive to my environment, maybe too much at times. And I like to I overthink things naturally. I always also try not to culturally as well. Like I'm very aware of the environment I'm in and try to be understanding as much as I can. So I guess that helped a lot in my professional journey, or even the way I'm raising my kid.
That is so true. I mean, we've talked about this too in a personal setting, right? Of how for many of us who grew up across cultures, it's like you learn very early on how to spot things and through body language and just like the nuance of things. And it's and I feel the same way because I feel like it's taken me so far and it's so hard to explain too when you're with people. Like, and sometimes I find myself just saying like something happens and I tell my husband too, I'm like, just read the room. And he's like,
Yeah.
I did. It's
Yeah.
just, I'm like, no, like you
Yes.
need to pay attention to some of these things. Um, and I wonder too sometimes whether it's some of it is cultural, right? I talk to my parents a lot and I know in certain cultures there's so much emphasis on actually reading body language versus just hearing something and saying, "Okay, yeah, that's exactly what he means." And it's quite often we see all the clash in cultures, right? Someone says something
Uh-huh.
and they're like, "Yep, we take it at face value," and other people are like, "No, that's not what he meant." Um, so it's one of those things I often think about, and I write about it. What third culture means and what that really how it helps us think about the world and shapes how we view so many things and kind of carry through, right? And you talked about boarding school and you talked about your international upbringing. And I read a lot of books by entrepreneurs, and everyone talks about just different things that really shape them. And so one of the things they talk a lot about is formative experiences in their youth, right? So thinking back about your boarding school years or just generally your international upbringing, how did you think that prepared you for creating your own path?
Oh, um, it's interesting because so I started my company, but I never really thought about entrepreneurship the way it's described in the media these days. For me, it's just creating a business, and
Hmm.
I don't necessarily I don't drink the Kool-Aid of like a unicorn versus a mom and pop business. For me, every business has its own difficulties and strength and weaknesses, and I think we should just recognize anybody who's trying to build something the same way. um and like entrepreneurship and startup became like this cool cultural, like hustle cultural. And I never looked at it that way. My mom is an entrepreneur, but she doesn't consider herself an entrepreneur. Funnily enough, even the word in French is just
Hmm.
like it's actually your project manager. Like on a construction site, your
Oh,
project manager is called an entrepreneur. So
oh,
yeah, so when I'm like I'm in entrepreneurship, she's like, "What do you mean? Like you're project manager, right?" Like so that for me, like being Algerian, having a mom who run her own business, and I was raised by a single mom. It was just what I knew naturally. And I didn't fall in it like I really want to build my business. It was more like I started my career in the watch industry. And funnily enough, growing up in Switzerland, I was not necessarily the watch lover. I fell into it when I moved to Singapore. And so a lot of people like, yeah, you grew up in Switzerland, you end up in watches,
uh,
very classic, but not at all. It was just by accident. But I really love the industry. And the first company I worked with, which was Richemont, and I was at Bohème Mercier, and it was a very small team. We were four taking care of Southeast Asia, and it was already very entrepreneurial. Of course, you get the support system from Richemont, but within the team, I really liked the fact that there was this ownership on your task, that you could build things, that you could brainstorm. And I was very lucky to have an amazing boss who's now my best friend, funnily enough.
oh,
um and it's his birthday today. But
oh,
so yeah, so he gave me a lot of it came very naturally to be part of like owning what I was doing. And then after that, when I had my daughter and we came back to Singapore, um I wanted to work. I'm not made to be at home. It's not
yeah,
part
I
of
feel
my
you.
DNA.
Yes.
I tried for 4 years. It's really not me. Like I don't, everybody has its own thing. It doesn't work for me. It works for others and it's great. So I wanted to go back to the workforce, and naturally I had a good reputation in the watch industry, and a lot of people said, like made me offer, but I was very worried that one, I had a little one who was 9 months old. I used to work really long hours. I was paid peanuts. I didn't see a lot of women at important position back then. Now it's much better. And so I had this very naive idea of like, I'm seeing a gap in the market. why don't I just do it and see, and I'll be in charge of my schedule and everything that I thought before I dived in. So, so I don't know if it's I think what it the roots of it is probably my mom more than
Mhm,
boarding school, but at the same time, boarding school gave me a certain confidence, um, when it comes to my approach of, even socially. I speak several languages, I live in different countries. So I guess it gave me that confidence. And then also the friends I grew up with are really my family. So I have my support system even though they're not close to me. So that
mhm.
probably helped shape. Yeah, but yeah, I guess it's my mom.
And then I think that's so true for many people, right? I think because you grew up with that and then you naturally come back to it, right? And I feel like when I look at my parents and the path I took, I did everything I could to not be in corporations, right? Because I was like, I don't want to be like my parents. And then came full circle in a corporation in tech. Like, I am my parents. And it's
Yeah,
just it's
yeah,
such a weird concept, and it's interesting how you think about, like, entrepreneurship. Because when I remember asking my parents the same question after they retired and they started their own business, and my dad's like, "I would never call myself an entrepreneur." It's just to your point, I'm just starting a business. I see something, I think there's an opportunity, and that's it. I'm not, I and he was almost so turned off by it, like, when people ask, "Oh, you're an entrepreneur." He's like, "Oh, no, don't call me that." Like, I just run a business." And it's such a interesting concept because I feel like here, just the term itself, right? Like, "Oh, yeah, I'm an entrepreneur." And for whatever reason, I think there's this idea that if you're an entrepreneur, that you're somehow running this, like, crazy business, everything's blowing up, and like, you're a Zuckerberg or something. It's such a weird concept, and I thought about it when I paused and I started my own consultancy, and everyone's like, "Oh, what do you call yourself now?" I don't know. I just run a consultancy. That's all I say. And they're like, "Oh, but you're an entrepreneur, you're a CEO." I'm just a comms person who runs my own consultancy. That's it. Like, nothing more beyond that. It's not glamorous at all. But yeah, it's an interesting, and I love that I learned something new. I didn't realize it meant project manager.
yeah.
So,
It's entreprendre is starting something. It's more about that, but it doesn't. Like I often say, like the most sexy businesses are often the ones you don't hear about, and you
mm,
actually um um like frown upon it. Um, I mean, for in my personal history, my mom quit school when she was 12 years old, and she did all sorts of things, from
mm,
her first jobs to today. I mean, she's 80, she's still working. Um, and a lot of people in around me will be very surprised that she never went to university. I'm the first one in my family who graduated from university, and yet I had such a great life on a very simple business. It's not a public company, it's nothing, there's no technology in it,
mm.
etc. And yet, I think she has a very interesting life. Maybe one day I should write a book about it. But and so therefore I don't like labels to start with. Like, this is something that really bothers me. Like, I feel that if you label something, you actually or someone, you actually don't get to know them very well because you have those preconceived idea. Like, you need to fit in that box. So I don't do it, and I try to pass on that to my daughter.
I like that. I like that because I think we have talked about this the last time we connected about labels and how I think people try to put you in boxes too, right? And a lot of times when they can't quite figure you out, uh, and I found that to be true. Every time someone's like, "Where are you from? What do you do?" Like, and all of that, and even just in explaining, they can't comprehend, and so it's like I find that as I'm just sharing my upbringing, you asked a question, I'm answering, and they can't compute, and they're automatically like, "Oh, so you're this." No, not really. And
Yeah.
it's like,
But yeah.
so no, go on,
And
sorry.
it's sometimes hard to connect as well because you have the typical questions, um, where's home? That's a
Mm,
huge question. And growing up, the term third culture kid did not exist, right?
yeah,
You didn't think about it. You just went with emotion. And you were like, okay, I don't fit here, but I fit here. And naturally you will find your tribe. But the big question of where is home, I mean, I'm 46 and people still ask me, and then it doesn't help that my husband has also his own,
yeah,
he's like,
yeah,
you know, it adds a layer of complication. and
yeah,
and and when I say home is wherever I am or wherever I decided
mhm,
to be. I can see that for some people that's their blanket. They need that. I
mm,
I personally don't need it. And even during COVID when we were in lockdown, like I know that many of my friends really suffered from it, not being able to go and see their families, not being
mhm,
able to travel. And in my case, it was a no-brainer. It was just like I couldn't it's not that I didn't empathize with them, but I'm like, I don't get it. Like, we're safe. We have technology today that we didn't had back in the day, so we
mm,
could actually, communicate with our family. For me, it was much more important that everybody was safe. That was my
mm,
biggest stress, especially my mom was in Algiers. But then the rest, not going back home
mhm,
was, like and so I realized around me a lot of people that was very important to them, and it was defined by a place,
mm.
where in my case it's not. And so I get it, but but yeah, but it was interesting. Like, some friends were like, yeah, I almost had a mental breakdown during COVID. In Singapore, we were very sheltered. So I
Yeah,
was like, I was like, oh, I'm not sure. I'm okay. I haven't
yeah.
seen my mom, but she's safe. And, as long as my family is safe, then I'm okay. But also, I mean, I left my country because of the Civil War. So maybe that's also part of my DNA somehow. But yeah, so yeah, but anyway.
We had the same thing. I remember having conversations with people who, um, were upset and understandably, were like, "Oh my gosh, I haven't seen my family, my parents in 2 months or something." And it's similar to you, I found it hard to connect because I was like, "Okay, well, we're all safe," and not realizing that, uh, when I finally verbalized that, "Oh, I actually haven't seen my parents in 4 years." What is it not because of COVID,
Yeah.
it's
Yes,
just
same.
because of life, right? But that was, I guess, still sounds crazy to a lot of people, but for my family, that was kind of normal, and because we were all in different parts of the world, but we connected, we're on the phone all the time, we're on video, whatever, and so it didn't really, it was quite interesting, the concept of, like,
Mhm.
"Oh, home," and I was like, "Well, there's not really a home because 'cause they're all over the place, so I guess home is wherever they are at this point
Yeah,
for them," right?
exactly.
And it was such an interesting thing to help people understand. It's great, I'm glad we're talking about this because I feel like for the longest time, I'm the only one who says it, and everyone's like, "Yeah, okay, we don't get that,
Yeah,
but
or
sure."
yeah, yeah, or your parents don't love you, you know?
Yes,
You're
yes,
like,
I
"No,
get that a
that's not
lot.
the case. We just have
Yeah,
a different relationship." I mean, not a different relationship, it's just different family, ways and of doing things just because the life we had to have for different reasons. Each family has their reasons. I do see when I say I would age, I went to boarding school, a lot of people
mhm,
think my parents were horrible, but for me, it's like it was such I mean, my mom privileged my education above everything else, which is the most amazing gift you can give to your kids because you're actually giving them the toolbox and the arsenal they're gonna need in their life and their future. You're making sure they're prepared. So she might have done the sacrifice of not being next to me physically,
Mhm.
but for me, she gave me a much bigger gift, right? So often, like in social settings, especially when I get to meet someone, I can see their thinking drifting that way. And okay, sometimes you want to correct, but sometimes you don't want to have to explain yourself all the time.
Mm.
It gets tiring as well. And then,
Yes. Yes.
it's like all of a sudden it's like, just now, like a 20 minutes explanation of the why and how,
Mhm.
so, but yeah, but I can see often like, oh my God, you were so tiny and I'm like, it was fine. It was the best gift she gave me. And she did what she thought was the best thing for me at the time. And it is thanks to that I'm who I am today. And I speak several languages, lived in different countries, met my husband when I was in boarding school, married 18 years this year, you see, so
My gosh.
yeah, so not, not a negative thing at all.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's funny. I actually had a conversation with someone just today about this because we were talking about motherhood, parenting, and all of that. Ben, my husband, also went to boarding school. I think he left when he was about 11 or 12. I was saying that I remember last year when I was in Singapore visiting my brother, and we had this whole conversation, and I was actually with his wife, and she couldn't understand. She was like, "I don't get it. You guys grew up separately," and it didn't even hit us, right? As until like last year as we were having this conversation that he was like, "Yeah, yeah, you left when you were like 8 or something." He's like, "You weren't in the car with me when I went to school." And she was just like, "What? Like, that's insane." And I see the same reaction when we share that here with people, and they're like, "Oh my god," right? And then there's some people who don't fully understand the concept of boarding school, or some are like, "Oh, were you in trouble?" And
Yes,
it's like,
yes, that
No. Um, no, I just moved around a lot and I'm like, "Okay, okay, and what does that mean?" And so it's interesting because when Ben and I tell people how we grew up, and they're like, "Oh, okay. Are you planning to send your child away?"
yeah,
I was like, "Okay, it wasn't all bad. We learned to be independent from a young age." And yeah, and I think there's this concept of like, your parents didn't have you with them. What does that mean as a parent, right? And I'm like,
mm,
okay, well, culturally, I feel like it was so much more common outside the US, that it did, I would hear it all the time and I'm like, oh yeah, okay, that makes sense. And having friends now with older kids who are doing the same thing and the kids are off to boarding school, but it's interesting the perception people have of what that means. And I found
mhm,
that here, particularly in the US, I think because there's so much about boarding school, um, and some here, I mean, they call it boarding school. I'm not sure that's the right term for it. And it's really a place where, there are troubled teens who get sent there. And it's like, parents can't handle them, and that's where they go. So it's quite interesting sharing these things with people here and helping them understand, like, that's uh, when we talk about boarding school or, moving around, it's such a different experience from what you are seeing here. And it's crazy. I find it fascinating because it's like people's reactions are like, "Oh, that's
yeah.
weird." But
But there is, I can't remember the exact wording of the poem, but there is a poem about from Khalil Gibran, and he talks about, you
I
you
like
don't
it.
do kids for yourself,
Mhm.
you do kids for themselves. Like, you have to
Mm.
like, it's about their life. So, um, for me, it's that even with my daughter, like, they grow very fast. I joke that, a lot of people ask me the same question, are you going to send her to boarding school? And I hope I can. And anyway, now she's 14. She doesn't want to hang out with me. So she might as well get an extra experience,
Yeah.
outside me that will prepare her for life, university, etc., independence, resilience. living in society, especially now that we're all behind screens.
Mm,
How do you interact socially? Um, and yeah, it's a gift. I mean, I felt that most of us who graduated from boarding school, we were much more mature than the ones that stayed at home, much more independent, much more aware of our environment, even for safety reasons.
mhm.
Um, um, and yeah, it was yeah, for me it's a gift. After, like, I understand that some parents threaten their kids with boarding school if they're not behaving well, so
Yeah.
maybe that was carried on. But it's not that at all. Like, but yeah, I feel like boarding school should sponsor this podcast.
I know. Yeah. Any boarding school out there, international school, it's just saying, right?
Yes.
It's like between all the schools we've got to, like, somebody just sponsor this, please, because we need it. Okay. So I wanted to touch on the fifth collection because I think right now there has been in recent years, I guess I would say, there has been an explosion of this like secondhand luxury, consignment. I don't even know what the proper term is, but there's so many of them popping up. And part of it is this whole idea of sustainability and how do we look at, fashion in a circular way, right? And so you started Fifth Collection years ago, and I feel like it was so early. It was such a new thing, particularly in Asia.
Mhm.
So I just want to dive into that a bit and try to understand, what vision drove you to build this, right? Apart from just seeing that gap, but also how do you think the different cultural attitudes towards it, particularly in Asia, was challenging or enhancing your business approach?
Oh, so okay, so I started when I was in Shanghai, I started seeing a lot of platform showing up in Europe, some of them, or
Hmm.
in the US, some of them are now listed. Others are unicorn status, and I really like the idea. I was raised by a family who believed in buying quality and investment pieces in general, whether it's in your closet, art, and my family always saw that as something you could flip. My mom built her business. Sometimes she sold her jewelry when she needed art that she purchased. So that's a complete, trading mentality.
Mm-hmm.
I don't come from a country where you show up at the bank and ask for a loan and all those kind of things. You work it out as you can. So I started seeing those platforms popping up, everywhere in Europe and doing very well, and it made total sense. And then I came back to Singapore, and as I told you, I wanted to go back in the
Mm,
workforce. Um, and I wasn't too sure. My husband was already an entrepreneur at the time, and I was trying to figure out my way. And one day, in the evening, I was dressed a certain way for a party, for an engagement party, a surprise
mm.
engagement party for a friend of ours, and someone stopped me and said, "Weren't you wearing the same outfit 2 years ago for F1?"
My
And that was the
gosh.
husband of a friend of mine, yeah, and it was, well, first of all, I was like, "Yes,
What?
I repeat outfits, thank
Yeah.
you very much." But what was interesting is that all of a sudden, because there was a lot of girlfriends there, like, it sparked a whole conversation about women, and I realized I had my focus group just in front of me. And it was mostly them not daring to repeat outfit. You have to remember this is like 2012. This is the beginning of,
Mm,
Instagram booming, social media, and things like that. And we were not talking about sustainability at the time. That was not at the forefront in the media. So I had my focus group on the one side complaining they couldn't purchase quality items anymore because they felt that they couldn't wear it as much as they could. Singapore has no season, so if you buy something
yeah.
for winter, you need to store it, etc. So I started looking, like, how can, and even me moving from Shanghai, I had, like, winter things that I didn't need it. My life changed because I became a new mom, so there were certain things that I
Mm,
wanted I wanted also to part with. Um, and at the same time, I was looking at the way luxury brands were pricing things. And I was like, it's really hard to afford um, quality items, and now even it continue. We're talking right. It's just like, but it was really hard. And then speaking to my family, like I remember my mom telling me she's saving on a little bit of groceries and purchasing a Chanel bag or an Hermes bag, and I was like, well, that's impossible now. Like forget about
Mm.
it. So anyway, so all those ideas came together, and I went around in Singapore and looked at what was available in secondhand. And as you say, culturally, like even going into a second hand store felt like you were really going to your drug dealer. It was like
Yeah, yeah.
hidden, people were staring at each other. Like, is she gonna recognize me? Like, it was
Mm,
really not a pleasant experience. It felt like hidden. I mean, it was just like, and then you were not sure about, there was no return, refund,
mm,
authentication, like, and so then I wrote the business plan, and then I presented to my husband, and he said, let's do it. And so, yeah, so in 2000, so we start building the company in 2013, launched in 2014. So it was a whole year. E-commerce was really new. Shopify was
mm.
not where it is today. We didn't have AI. I mean, we had AI, but not as available as it is
Yeah.
today, etc. So we had to create the whole thing, and the whole goal was to actually. It wasn't beautifying vintage and secondhand. It was making secondhand a still luxury experience.
Mhm.
And so we did that. I run the business for 10 years. Um, Many of our customers used to forget that our items were secondhand on the site. They really felt like, and remember, like statistically speaking, I think 70% of a woman's closet never gets used.
Mm,
We're in a part of the world where women shop on a constant basis. We have customs such as Chinese New Year, where you're supposed to
mhm.
renew your wardrobe. It's very important
Yep.
culturally. So we
Mhm.
had we had an amazing pool of sellers. I mean, we really cornered the pool of sellers, and we had amazing pieces. We even had clients who almost purchased their own items from our sites because they was like, "Oh, I like that," and I was like, "Excuse me, that's yours."
Yeah.
Yeah, so that was very interesting. But it was still very hush hush, even after 10 years of running the operation, winning awards. We helped develop an authentication
Mm,
app that uses AI. Um, Despite all of this, you still had a bit of a stigma around it. And it was on the one side a blessing, on the other not, because word of mouth is the best marketing you can get out there. And it's not that we didn't get word of mouth. It was very, very, because you only have one item of each, a lot of people were gatekeeping. A lot of
oh.
people were like, and they were gatekeeping because they wanted access to this item, or they didn't want their friends to know that they were purchasing secondhand. There was like,
Yeah.
and then that they looked fabulous coming in the office, but nobody needs to know how I got it. So it was interesting.
Yeah.
We used to joke that we were the narcos of fashion. Everybody does it,
Yeah.
nobody talks about it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, yeah, so that was a very interesting, frustrating at times as well, especially when you get a lot of praise behind the scenes, and you know that you need those praise to be more front facing in order to help you grow your business. At times it was frustrating, but I mean, I achieved my goal was to make secondhand a luxury experience. I've achieved that. We had the most amazing customer service, not just in Singapore, worldwide. More than 50% of our business was overseas from Singapore. That's also something that people sort of struggled with. Like, how can you be in such the little red dot and still, serve countries everywhere? Like, I was like, well, first of all, we're 100% online, so it's cross border.
Yeah.
And then, we're English speakers, but it was interesting. Like, a lot of people were like, "You're in Singapore, so you serve only the Singapore market." And I'm like, "No, I'm not. My headquarters are in Singapore. My sellers were 100% Singaporean, which was amazing because I had such a repeat.
Mm.
And I never had to advertise for sellers. Sellers will find us. We had waiting lists to sell with us because at times we were overwhelmed with merchandise, etc. And people are, even now that I closed the business, people are still waiting for me to come back. I get at
Wow.
least 2 to 3 messages a month about, so are you done with your sabbatical? Are you coming back? So I achieved. I'm very proud of that. I just wish that we had more um, word of mouth when we were running operations. That would have
Yeah.
really helped us.
Yeah, I think that's tough, and that's why, I loved it. I purchased stuff from the 5th collection. I've sold stuff on the 5th collection. I just, and I just yeah, that's one thing that always stuck with me, right? I was trying to, because just culturally, I get it. I hear the conversations, right? And people are always so like, "Oh my gosh, where'd you get?" Even till this day, I feel like there are certain items that I've purchased from some of these amazing stores that, when I share here, I was like, "Oh yeah, I got it here." It's like, it's amazing. There's so much history behind this piece. And people are like, "Oh my gosh, that's amazing." But when I have that same conversation and I've brought, certain pieces with me when I travel, they're like, "Oh, okay." Like, someone else has owned it. And I was like, "Yeah, like, there's history." And but
Yeah.
there's this they're like, they can like, it's so hard for them to process that, and the thing is, there's certain secondhand items that are not necessarily cheap either, right? Because
Hmm.
some of these are rare items or, vintage finds that you can't even find anymore, but yet there's that stigma. So I've always wondered that because 'cause I'm like, it must be so hard to do this in Asia,
I mean,
but
culturally as well, right? Like,
mm,
um, there's the fact that there's this belief that the the person's aura is carried in their things, right? Like
yes.
in China. So, and then there was also a lot of perception that if you take secondhand, it's thrift store, it's smelly, it's dirty. There was a lot of this preconception of
Mm,
what a secondhand, or at the time we used to call it pre-love,
mm,
in order
mm,
to avoid the secondhand
yeah,
terms, where
yeah,
now the media is talking about secondhand, no problem. But what I thought was interesting is that they wouldn't do vintage at a time because it has changed. They wouldn't do vintage and secondhand in Singapore, but they will do vintage in Paris. It's like vintage in
yeah,
Paris has a complete different flavor,
yes,
even though
yes,
it's exactly the same item. And I really thought that
yeah,
was, psychologically, that was very interesting to observe, and sometimes hurtful because you're like, I'm much more affordable. I'm a local business,
yeah,
But
yeah,
yeah, but even the press at the beginning, like, I mean, we've got a lot of. I was very blessed that a lot of people in the press in Singapore were very helpful, and very encouraging. And we got published in most of the magazines, etc. So that, yeah, even the news, the Straight Times in Singapore, you name it. So that was that. But yeah, the perception, it's still there. I would say it's still there.
yeah, and I wonder how much of it is back to the cultural bit, right? Because for me, I get that because as a Chinese, I do buy items that are secondhand, but I will not touch shoes because that is a whole thing about, like, you're stepping into someone else's life or
Hmm.
so, as much as I always feel like, "Oh, I'm not super Chinese," and then there's certain things like that that happen, I'm like, "Oh, I totally believe it, whether it makes sense or not." And yeah, so for a while, even items and I get into this like, "Oh, I gotta cleanse it because it's you're bringing, a different energy in." It's such a weird thing to say, but
Yeah. But
I'm
then
like,
as a
"Yeah."
result, we had to do some marketing, which many marketing agencies or branding agencies didn't want to take me because it was so complex for
Mm.
them. So if you look at the Instagram of the fifth collection, we try to avoid as much as possible to put a human being in it.
Mm.
We never used any human model. And there was different reasons for that. We didn't want to add a layer that, this is secondhand, and on top of that, there's a model who wore it. And then, as you can imagine, from a pure operational perspective, I would have needed model of different sizes nonstop because each of my pieces were unique as well. So it would have
Yeah.
been very complex to do anyway. But in Asia, and then that was the first thing I noticed when I moved here. You will go to a Zara, you pick, white t-shirt, you try it on. It's like, oh, it fits. And then you go to the cashier and they will be like, do you want a new one?
Yes.
You don't get that elsewhere. Even in
Yeah.
Paris, you just whatever you tried in the changing room, you don't ask for a new
Yeah.
one. That's the one you're
Yeah.
getting.
Oh,
And then, when you get at the cashier, not only she asks you if you want a new one, but there's also like, would you like to inspect your purchase?
yes.
It's also very, it's within the region. Like I can't I've never been asked in Europe to inspect my purchase coming from the store, right? So
Yeah.
it's more that, yeah, so it's more than just the stigma of secondhand, and it carries the
Mm.
soul. Like even in a regular store, it's like that. So we had to be very inventive about how do you portray product without using a human being. How, like, we didn't work with KOLs on
Mm.
purpose. I just didn't want this. I didn't want I wanted people to just imagine themselves
Mm.
with that product, nobody
Yeah.
else. So you could project yourself in it. So that
Mhm.
was not easy. I'm sure that my photography team, like, were like, what the hell is wrong with her? Like, let's just put a model. Let's just use an influencer. Like, why are you overcomplicating the thing? And I also didn't want my sellers to be like, the stocks was on consignment, so I was responsible for those goods.
Mm.
I think when we decided that we wanted to go on a sabbatical, I had few $1 million worth of merchandise in my warehouse that I was responsible for. So I also didn't want to add a layer where, there's a model, she has like, she's,
Mm.
changing outfit, makeup. I was like, no, too much stress, not worth
Yeah.
it.
So you talked about sabbatical, and my big question for you is what next? Like, what's been going on? I'm always so excited because I know you were lecturing. Is that like the thing you're gonna go forward with? Like, what's next for you?
So what's interesting is that when you run your business, and I did that for 10 years. And by the way, I loved what I did. Like,
Mm.
and I'm not a fashion girl, even though everybody thinks I'm a fashion girl. Like, I'm very happy. Like today I put a shirt on because, but otherwise I'm a t-shirt. I was like, maybe I should look a little bit professional. Um, I love the marketing, the branding, the building side of it, and the strategic of it. And I really love what I did. But when you're responsible for everything at the end of the day, like, when I read some interviews of founders,
Mhm.
they're very glamorized. I'm like, that's not true. Like, I never had time to
Mm.
take care of myself. I didn't have time to yoga, journal, hug
Mm.
trees, you know wake up at
Yeah.
5 a.m. Like, that's such a
Yeah.
BS. And I'm very vocal about it because I'm so worried that the new generation just looks at
Mm.
those and thinks this is how it's done. So I didn't realize that I was it's not that I was trapped, but I was responsible for everything. I mean, of course I had a team. I didn't do that on my own, but
Mm.
it stops with me.
Mm.
And the market has changed and is changing and has continued to change. And I was like, I felt a bit trapped somehow. It was really hard to hire good people. That was just after COVID. My OG team stayed with me for 10 years,
No.
from day one to the last, etc. But then at a certain point, it was really hard to find good people to grow. And I was also seeing the purchasing trend was also changing from a
Mm,
seller perspective, and we're not manufacturers, so whatever comes to us, when it comes to us, we have to sell it. So I could
mm,
see like all of those things were were sort of aligning, and I felt that I needed some headspace. I was like, if this company goes to the next level, I need some headspace. I can't.
mm,
We're a team maybe of 10, 12, um, and I was like, I can't do that anymore. So mm, the sabbatical came where we were like, we need a break. We need a clean slate if we want to be able to rebuild.
mm,
Um, and so we're like, let's take a chances. And so when we announced, first of all, we were showered with love, so much love. I mean, I've never posted any of the things that people sent to us, but I was just like, wow, the silent majority was
yeah.
watching closely.
Yes,
Anyway,
yes.
so that felt very special. But then after that, first of all, you need to grieve 10 years of your
Mm,
life. My daughter was probably one plus year old. Now she's 14. So yeah,
wow.
no, yeah. Or no, she was 3, 4. I mean, I have pictures of her in each
Yeah,
of my offices. So it's 10 years of your life, big bulk of your corporate career, whatever.
yeah.
And so I didn't realize how exhausted I was, which in hindsight was probably a burnout in the making.
Mhm,
I just, like I went from doing 10,000 things a day to one thing will just freaking exhaust me. Like I would look at my
yeah,
husband with whom I work and I was like, what's wrong with me? Like,
yeah,
how is that
yeah.
possible? That one task gets me so anxious um and then you sort of grieve the past and think about it.
Mhm,
Um, but in a positive way, not necessarily in a
yeah.
negative way. Like, I took the decision of taking that sabbatical. So, um, and then you're like, and now what? Like, what do I do? And then again, some people label you till today. They were like, well, it's gonna be
Mhm,
very tough for you. You were the boss. So, if you're a boss, you'll always be a boss. Nobody will hire you because all of a sudden you're not the last mile, you're not the one who so first of all, I would love to have a support system. Like I don't think a lot of people realize how in big structure you have a
mhm.
support system that helps you
Yep.
focus on your specialty versus being stretched to the maximum when you're running
Mm,
your own venture. And then I looked, our parents are a little bit you know, older. My mom is 80, my
mm.
husband's parents are in 85. And I looked at the choices they've made into their retirement and I was like, "Oh, we're gonna have to start thinking about that." Like where's home? The
Yeah,
famous
yeah.
that
Oh,
famous question,
yes.
where's home?
Huh.
And then you see
Yes.
we saw a lot of people leaving Singapore as well after years, etc. So you're like, how about us? Like we never had time to sit down and plan it. And I don't think we are actually effectively trained to plan that part of our life. This is
Yeah,
the
yeah.
unwritten script, right? Nobody tells you what you're
Yes.
supposed to do in retirement. You know that you need to reach retirement, and then it's I don't know. I'm just going to read all day, but there's no concrete plan the same way that you plan your career or when you want to have kids
Yeah.
or etc. So I just observed my family, my immediate family, um, and then decided I was going to reverse engineer my retirement to now. And so few things came, and I have like a sort of I call that my 5 pillar strategy.
Okay. Ooh.
And yeah. And so one thing that I realized is that I want to stay as active as possible for the longest
Mm,
time. Again, as I mentioned, I'm not made to stay at home. Like I'm
mhm.
happy to be in my house. Like right now the background is blurred, but this is like my little nest, my, booking new like but I wanna be able to still stay social, and being
Mhm.
third culture kids means that wherever we go, we're gonna have to be social again at a pretty older age, which gets difficult. You make
Yes.
friends. Um, and then I realized that whenever I was building the 5th collection, the times where I was the most in, like, in the zone was when we were brainstorming ideas and I was explaining concept and strategy and
Mm,
how this bag was created, what's the history behind it,
mm,
why this and this does that. So I was like, you know what? How about I try teaching? This is something I can take with me in retirement. This is something I can do my entire life anywhere. And
mhm.
so I approached, I used to work closely with certain fashion university here. So I approached a few friends and they nicely trusted me. And so I've been teaching at La Salle marketing and business to future designers for now almost a year.
Ooh,
And then I just finished my first semester at ESSEC, where I taught a class called Innovation in the Luxury Industry. And
yep.
I absolutely loved it.
Wow.
It was, I
Wow.
mean, the I told my class that it's like the first day that I was here that I wanted to learn from them as much as they would
Mhm.
learn from me, and it's exactly what I got at the end. Actually, I got a little bit emotional on the last day saying
Oh.
goodbye to class of 53. But I loved it. I loved the fact that, as a marketer on top of that, young ones are asking me questions which sometimes I don't have the answers, but it forces me to continue,
Yeah.
thinking about those things versus being stuck into we've been doing
Mm,
this for 15 years. Um, and I love prepping the classes. I'm an avid reader and I always have tons of ideas, so it was really nice to pass it to them and see how they would react to them. Was I feeling the market correctly? Those kind of things. So I really enjoyed it, and I hope it doesn't stop, because yeah, and I had lunch with an old friend of mine who passed by Singapore, and he said it in French. He's like, "Oh, so you're gonna do transmission de savoir, so transfer your knowledge."
yeah.
But for some reason, when he said it to me in French, which is my mother tongue, I was just like, "Yeah." Like, it just, I was like, "Wow," like, "Yes," and it's so, like, I didn't even realize this is something that would be, joyful, and then I will
Yeah.
get, so yeah, so hopefully I'll be able to do even more. I have a few ideas that I wanna take, especially for people and their career at our age. It's really hard to, reinvent yourself at times, so I
Mhm.
hope I can spread some of this.
That's so amazing. I mean, I commend you because I like, teaching is, in my view, so hard. And I think,
Yes.
we talked about this in our conversation too. It's just it's not just, and it's like an international, right? Like, it's international students, and
Mhm.
like culture comes into play again, and I think it's amazing. I think it's amazing that, to see this path, right? And like the transfer of knowledge. Like, what a nice way. I mean, it sounds so
Yeah.
much better in French. Uh,
Yes, really. It's funny how it resonated more in French with me than it, like, when he said it, I was like, "Oh," and then I value education. Like, I find that this
mhm,
is I always told everyone who worked with me, or even my own daughter, or now the students, that there's 2 things that nobody can ever take away from you. It's
mhm.
your education and your reputation. And
Yes.
it's not and for me, especially nowadays, it's not even a question of means. There's so much things available for
Mhm.
free online. Like, I'm known to do deep dive. Like, as soon as I don't know something, I'll spend hours on YouTube listening to specialists, and at your own pace. I find it just unbelievable. So I really value education. I find that this is like the thing, yeah, that nobody can takes away from you. So go for it.
Yeah. I totally believe that. And I see it. My parents are similar ages, and my dad is still, and my mom too. They both read a lot and very much in that space. So every time I remember having conversations with them where I bring something back from work and they're like, "What does that mean?" And next thing I know, the next conversation, my dad's like, "Oh, so I read all these articles and I found all these things and I know everything about it now. We can have a conversation." And, and it's just like, "Oh my gosh, this is insane." But it's so important, right? And I remember it just in a work setting too with the team or now with my mentees, I'm like, having this learning, a growth mindset is so important because everything changes all the time. And I feel like everything we learned, most of it doesn't even apply anymore, right? And
Yeah.
how do you stay on top of things and how do you stay fresh, And for me, how do I create a podcast? Like this is,
Mhm.
and
Yeah.
the next generation are like, "Oh yeah, this is simple." And I'm like, "Okay, well, I have to go figure this out because this is not from my time." And it's interesting. And I love it because we tell our daughter the same thing, right? Education and reputation. And I feel like reputation is something people don't often think about. And it's
Yes.
like so important. And yet I feel like people take it so lightly. And when I think about how things work now with social media, it scares me. Like thinking about the next generation and how they think about reputation, especially with, all these influencers and with that rise of influencers and how that itself evolved too. I feel like influencers, when they first came out, it was such a different ballgame. And now I see my daughter watching clips of influencers like her age or slightly older and what she perceives as okay. That I'm like, huh, okay.
Yeah.
Like this is
Yeah.
like,
Yeah. Or her
that's
sense of
interesting.
fashion.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
But yeah,
Yeah, it's
again, education. And then I think as a marketer, I teach my daughter how to read between the lines. I try as
mm,
much as possible to show her how the machine works.
mm,
She's looking at the final result, but how does it work?
mhm. Yep.
And I've been doing this since she's very young. And finger crossed, it's getting somewhere in,
Yep.
like,
Yep.
she's like, but I've been, yeah, like, I don't know, like, for instance, like, she started working out,
Mhm.
and all of a sudden she is served some advertising on YouTube about slimming tea.
Mm,
And so I'm telling her, I was like, you see, like, you start watching innocent video of working out.
mm,
And then now they're thinking you're on a
mhm,
diet, and then they're pushing those things, and so then
mhm.
I explain, so she's very aware, but it's true that it's a lot of work that our parents didn't have to do with us because
Yeah.
we didn't grow up in social media, and even the velocity at which um,
Mm,
um, we were bombarded with information was completely different. I was in China when Facebook boomed and it was banned, so I didn't
mm.
see the whole thing. Um, and yeah, and now it even country where the whole country is on 5G, like, and the
Yeah.
data is super cheap, so it's like, all day long. So yeah, we didn't have to deal with that. I'm
Yeah.
glad.
It's yeah, I worry, right? And one of the hot topics next is just my daughter's slightly younger, that the whole thing about cell phones. And right? And in certain countries, kids get them pretty young, but because that's baked into their education, right? Like some of the stuff that I think like in Korea, it's quite common and because they're having these group chats with their teachers and stuff like that. But also things are, I think, perhaps more regulated. And one of the things for me, and I struggled to figure out when is the right time because I personally grew up with cell phones just by the nature of what my parents did, and hence all the phones, the old school
Okay, I know.
phones that um, but then I was reminded that yes, I had the phones, but I wasn't on it all the time and texting people because no one else had a phone, so I was just
And it
texting
was
my
it, it
parents.
was a it was a pain to text. Do you remember
Yeah,
the ones you
yeah,
have
and
behind?
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's like, we can't see anything, and it's like and so I keep having to remind myself that, yes, I had cell phones at a certain age, but that was before anybody and it really just served its purpose, right? Like, my parents can call me, I can call for help or whatever it is, and I can reach somebody. And now it's like having to think about what does this mean? And so it's quite a scary state to be in, I feel, as
Mhm.
parents right now and trying to
And
figure out like navigate what is,
what's
you know,
interesting is that, I even had that in the office. You know, sometimes we'll email or text a client and she wouldn't answer, and I was like, at a certain point, I was like, "Maybe we should call."
mm,
And the youngest generation does not call. So
yeah.
they're glued to their I mean, think about it, you're glued to a phone, but you don't call.
Yes.
And that's something like the fact that you don't have, you have less and less social interactions, and,
Hmm.
you know, they're all on the screen. Um, Coming back to my reverse engineering of retirement is how it's very important. We need that to keep our cognitive wellness, our mental health, etc. So yeah, calling, you know, instead of texting or
Yeah.
spending hours on scrolling, because yeah, most of my young team members were super nervous at the idea of talking over a phone.
Oh,
It's yeah,
that's wow, that's crazy. I mean, I guess it makes sense. Yeah, I've spoken to people and I've seen people who hang up, or if someone's like the phone's ringing and they just hang up
yeah.
and
That's
then they'll
because they're
text the
scam
person.
numbers. Oh, okay.
Yeah. Yeah, and like, what do you need? And I'm like, you could have just picked up the phone. And or I've seen other people like, "Why are you calling me? Just text to me." Well, in that sense, I'm glad that I have, families away and that is the main way that Olivia communicates with them,
Mhm.
right? Like you're not texting anybody, you're calling them and you're having a conversation. And this is the proper way of doing it. And okay, I know we've got over time. I have
No.
two final questions, and one
Okay.
is I just want to keep it fun. So these are like rapid fire questions.
Okay.
And as you mentioned, you're an avid reader. So my first question for you is what would be the title of your memoir?
Oh my god. Um It's my gut. It's like, "Fuck it." You know, I'm like, yeah, yeah, I guess so, yeah, that'd be a good one, like, you know, I'm sure
Yeah.
I'll do very well and, people will talk about it. Um,
Yeah.
I yeah, I'm not sure, like, you see, like, I would love to write at a certain point, but, I guess part of my education is, like, who am I to be a writer? Who am I
No.
to be a memoir, you know?
Oh,
I have this, you know, those voices behind me telling me, like, "Who are you? What did you achieve?" Like,
oh
you know,
no.
so that'd be, really hard, but if I had to, um yeah, I guess fuck it, we'll do it.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, that's definitely going to catch some attention. I
Right?
mean, if I walked in a bookstore and I saw fuck it, I'm heading there first. Like,
You see?
yeah, like what are you referring to? Just general, right? Like I would
Exactly.
totally go to it. So that is very refreshing because I love that because I feel like I've asked people that same question in other settings and everyone's always trying to be super like it has to be this super nice memoir or like a title and no, I like fuck it. So all right. Wow. Okay. Okay. And then a similar thread, but what book do you think has had the biggest impact on you?
Wow. Oh, books. There's so many. It's so hard to choose one. Um, and I was so lucky. I had this French teacher in boarding school who realized that I really enjoyed reading. And so, of course, in the French system, you have to read quite a lot of books. And she used to give me extra ones on the side, just to shape me, sort of like to,
Mm.
you know, to work the muscle. And I still hold her so dear to, like, she's one of the teacher who shaped me. Um, and I guess the books, there's set of books, but like most of like de Maupassant books on different, he tries to analyze human beings, each of his book. And I guess, yeah, any of his book will do. Um, I should maybe I never reread books. That's something I never do, but maybe I should.
All right. And one last rapid fire. What is one item that you'll never part with? Like, this is not rapid fire.
Yeah, I know. I'm not really good at rapid fire. Sorry. I'm like, hmm. um, oh, I don't know. After dealing with so many people's things, I don't know if I want to get attached to things.
Fair enough.
Um, you see what I'm saying? Like I've seen so much things. Like, um, what was the good thing? I don't know. So tough. Um, okay, if I need maybe my father's watch. Yeah, my
Oh,
father's watch. I
yeah.
think yeah, that would be like. But otherwise, I'm pretty good at letting go of things nowadays, especially after having helped so many people, and seeing the amount of items you can surround yourself. And I don't think we realize how it has an impact on your mental health actually.
But all right. So as we come to a close, I am thinking, what are what are some key takeaways that you would like our listeners to hold on to as they reflect on this conversation?
Um, don't put labels,
Yeah.
like
Oh, yes.
don't try so hard to put labels on things or on people. You'd be surprised who you meet. Um, and actually sometimes you'll meet people who are probably your best will become your best support system through that. Because we talked about, entrepreneurship, venture building, I would say don't believe the hype as well. Do your
Yeah.
research. Again, I always bring back everything to the education I want to give to my
Hmm.
daughter, and I'm so worried that she will drink that Kool-Aid of how easy it is, how everything is on a,
Mm,
like a very uh, clear trajectory, and
mm,
which is not. Um, don't be a venture snob versus a corporate. Any success is legit. I don't see one better than the other because there's also that team entrepreneur, team corporate. No,
yeah.
any
Yeah.
success at anything you do is valid and should be recognized. Um, and then I would say be a lifelong learner, like never stop learning. That would be, yeah, my third advice. I mean, I'm not sure who I am to give advice to the world, but okay.
Well, everyone has, I think everyone has valuable lessons and life lessons that they can share, right? And
Yeah,
I think,
true.
that's why we have these conversations and that's why we connect with people. And, that is the aim of this entire podcast is for us to just learn from each other. So, and it's funny how many people come on and they're like, I don't think I should be giving advice. I'm like, you absolutely should. So,
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
I mean, there are some people who probably shouldn't, but they're very publicly sharing them. So we're going to balance it out a little. So,
fair
yeah.
enough.
But no, that's really great. And thank you. Thank you so much for being here today.
Well,
And
thank
I've really
you.
enjoyed our conversation. It's
Me
so
too.
refreshing.
And
I love this. So,
I think
yeah.
we should thank the friend in common who
Yes.
indirectly made that happen. So hi
Yeah.
Janice.
Yeah. Hi, Janice.
Right?
You get a shout out everywhere.
Exactly.
Yep, yep, she got a shout out at her wedding too. It's like, "Janice, please stand up." Yeah.
Exactly.
I'm glad, yes, I'm so glad we reconnected. It was so nice to see you in Singapore last year, and I am glad we're talking and, we're all kind of on similar paths, and this has been really, really nice.
Well, same here. And then congratulations for In Between Worlds. I can't wait
Thank
to
you.
see more.
Thank you. Well,
Okay.
have a great day, and thank you
Th
so much for being
Thanks,
here.
take care. Bye.
You too.